The air was heavy with smoke and dust, the alien marketplace alive with noise, shouts, and the clinking of metal chains. Dozens of cages lined the center square, each holding beings from different worlds, some tall and scaled, others small and covered in fur. All of them looked tired, hungry, and hopeless. The human named Rion walked slowly through the crowd. His clothes were simple, worn from travel. His boots carried the red dirt of 3 planets, and his coin pouch was light. He had come to this market looking for supplies, maybe a job. He had not planned to spend much. And certainly not on a slave. Then he saw her. She was standing on a small wooden platform, a chain around her wrists. Her clothes were nothing more than thin fabric, barely covering her shoulders. Her skin was pale, her hair dark and falling over her face, but it was her eyes that stopped Rion in his tracks. They were large, bright, and filled with silent pain. Not anger, not hate, just a quiet, desperate plea. The auctioneer, a thick-skinned alien with yellow eyes, shouted over the crowd. Lot number 17. A personal slave, young and healthy, trained for obedience. The crowd murmured. Some aliens laughed. A few humans turned their heads away. The girl kept her gaze low. Her hands trembled slightly. Rion could see the way she bit her lip as if bracing for whatever came next. Opening bid, 20 credits. The auctioneer barked. No one spoke. For a moment, the only sound was the buzzing of flies and the distant rumble of cargo ships. 15 credits. The auctioneer tried again, lowering the price, surely. Someone wants this one. She's quiet, will not fight back. From the back, a sharp voice called, 10 credits. It was a merchant Rion recognized. A cruel alien known for buying slaves cheap and working them to death. Rion's jaw tightened. He had not planned for this, but something in his chest told him to act. Without thinking, he raised his hand. 11 credits. The merchant turned to glare at him. 12. Rion's voice was calm but firm. 13. The auctioneer's eyes brightened at the sudden bidding war. 14. The merchant snapped. Rion's coin pouch felt like it weighed nothing. He knew he was down to his last coin, the one he had kept for emergencies. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. All I have, he said, dropping the final coin onto the wooden table. It was small, worn, and worth exactly 15 credits. The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads, wondering why a human would waste his last coin on a slave no one else wanted. The merchant cursed under his breath and turned away. The auctioneer grinned. Sold. To the human, the girl's head lifted slightly. Her eyes found his, confusion clear on her face. She seemed to search for something, maybe cruelty, maybe mockery, but she found neither. The chain around her wrists was unlocked. The metal collar still remained. But at least she could move her hands freely. Rion stepped forward, offering his hand to help her down from the platform. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers cold. Against his, as they stepped away from the stage, the crowd parted. Some whispered, others laughed. A few called out things in alien tongues that Rion didn't care to understand. The girl walked beside him in silence, her steps small and careful. As they reached the edge of the market, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost afraid to be heard. Why? Why would you do that? Rion glanced at her, because no one else would. She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide if he was telling the truth. Then she looked away, pulling the thin fabric of her dress tighter around her, behind them in the shadows of the market stalls. A tall figure watched them leave. Its eyes followed their every step, and its mouth curled into something between a smile and a snarl. Rion didn't notice. He was too busy thinking about the girl's eyes, and the strange way they made him feel. He didn't know what trouble he had just bought for himself, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't leave her there. The marketplace noise faded as they walked toward the docking bay. But the sound of that last coin hitting the table still echoed in his mind. It had been all he had left, and he had given it away for a stranger. He glanced at her again, wondering who she really was and why it felt like freeing her was the most important thing he had ever done. The girl walked beside Rian through the dusty streets, her bare feet moving carefully over the uneven ground. She didn't speak, didn't even look up. Every step seemed like it was taken out of habit, as if she was used to being led somewhere without question. Rian kept his pace slow. He didn't want her to think he was dragging her. The marketplace was behind them now, but the echo of voices and cruel laughter still clung to the air. They passed stalls selling glowing fruits, cages of squawking alien birds, and barrels of strange liquids. The smell of fried meat and spice drifted from a nearby food cart. Rian's stomach growled. He realized he hadn't eaten since morning. He stopped at the cart, bought a small loaf of bread and a skewer of roasted meat. It cost more than he should have spent, but he handed it to the girl without hesitation. She looked at the food in her hands, her brow furrowed. Her lips parted as if she wanted to ask something, but instead she took a small bite. Then another. Her chewing was quick, desperate, as if she feared someone might take it away. "Eat slowly," Rian said. His voice was calm, not commanding. She glanced at him, then nodded. She slowed her bites, but her eyes never stopped scanning the street, always watching for trouble. After a while, the narrow streets opened into the docking bay. Ships of all shapes and sizes sat under the hazy sky. Engines rumbled, workers shouted. Cargo droids beeped as they rolled past. Rian's ship was small, patched together from old parts. The hull was scratched and dull, but it was his. He pressed a button on his wristband, and the ramp lowered with a hiss. The girl stopped at the bottom of the ramp. Her eyes moved over the ship as if it was something strange and dangerous. "Is this yours?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Rian replied. "It's not much, but it flies." She hesitated before stepping onto the ramp. The metal was cold under her bare feet. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oil and metal. The lights flickered. Once before settling into a steady glow, Rian led her into the main cabin. It was small, a table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, a storage cabinet, and a narrow hallway leading to the cockpit and the sleeping quarters. "You can sit," he said. Pulling out a chair, she sat slowly, her posture stiff, her hands rested. In her lap, still unsure if she was allowed to relax. "Where are you taking me?" she asked after a long silence. Rian thought for a moment. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Away from here." She studied his face, searching for a lie. When she didn't find one, she lowered her gaze again. He walked to the control panel, tapping a few buttons. The ship's engines rumbled to life. The vibrations hummed through the floor. The docking bay doors slid open, revealing the blackness of space beyond as the ship lifted off. The girl looked out the small round window. Stars began to fill the view. She leaned forward, her lips parting slightly for the first time. Rian saw something new in her eyes, a spark of wonder. They broke through the atmosphere. Leaving the dusty planet behind, the ship hummed smoothly now, cruising among the stars. Rian returned to the table. He set a small cup of water in front of her. "Drink," he said gently. She wrapped her fingers around the cup, taking careful sips. "I don't understand you," she said softly. "You spend everything to buy me, but you don't treat me like them." "I'm not them," Rian replied simply. She looked down at the water, her reflection rippling. "People don't save others without wanting something." Rian leaned back in his chair. "Maybe I just wanted to do the right thing." Her brow furrowed as if the words didn't fit into the world she knew. She drank the last of the water in silence. Outside the window, a shadow passed, too quick to be a random ship. In the distance, faint lights followed them, moving in the Same direction. Rian didn't notice at first. He was watching her, wondering what her life had been before the chains, but the shadow in the distance kept closing in. Somewhere deep in the ship, a warning light blinked once, then twice. In the quiet of the cabin, the girl finally looked up at him. Rian, I think someone's following us. The hum of the engines filled the small ship, steady and low. The stars outside drifted past like a slow-moving river of light. Rian sat in the pilot's chair, keeping his eyes on the scanners. The blinking signal from earlier had faded, but he wasn't sure if that meant they were safe, or if whoever was following had simply gone dark. The girl sat quietly in the seat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. She had not asked any more questions about where they were going. She seemed to be listening to the sounds of the ship, as if memorizing them. After a while, Rian stood. "You should rest," he said. His tone was not a command, but an offer. She hesitated. Where? He led her down the narrow hallway to a small room. It wasn't much. A narrow bed bolted to the wall, a small storage shelf, and a round window looking out into space. The sheets were clean but worn, a faint scent of soap clinging to them. "This is yours," he said. Her eyes widened. "Mine." "For as long as you're here," he replied. "No one will take it from you." She stepped inside slowly, touching the edge of the bed with her fingertips, as if expecting it to vanish. She sat down carefully, the mattress soft under her. "Wait." Her shoulders seemed to loosen just a little. "You'll be safe here," Rian said, starting to leave, but before he could turn away, her voice stopped him. "Rian, will they come after me?" He looked at her. "If they try, they'll have to go through me." Something flickered in her expression, not quite trust yet, but something close. She nodded once, and he left her to rest, back in the cockpit. Rian watched the star map. The scanners showed no pursuit now, but he kept checking every few minutes. He knew the kind of people who worked in that market. They didn't like losing profit. Hours passed, the ship was quiet. Only the soft hum of the engine and the faint creak of metal as it cooled filled the silence. Then he heard it, a muffled sound, almost like a whimper. It came from the hallway. Rian rose and walked toward the small room. The door was half open. Inside, the girl was curled in the corner, the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes were shut tight, her breathing quick and shallow. He crouched beside her. "Hey," he said softly. "You're safe. It's just a dream." Her eyes snapped open, wide and frightened. For a moment, she didn't seem to recognize him. Then her breathing slowed. "I thought I was back there," she whispered. "You're not," he said. "You're here, on my ship. You're free." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "I don't know what that feels like." Rian stood, pulled the blanket gently around her, and helped her back onto the bed. "You'll learn," he said, "one day at a time." He turned to leave again, but her voice came once more. Softer this time. "Thank you." He didn't answer, just gave a small nod and stepped out. When she was alone again, she sat up slowly. Her gaze moved to the window. Outside, stars shone like countless tiny fires. She pressed her hand to the glass, feeling the cold. She had not seen the stars without a cage around her in years. For the first time, she let herself breathe deeply. The air here was clean, without the stink of the market, without the heat of the chains around her wrists. Her thoughts wandered back to the moment he had dropped that last coin on the table. She had seen men buy slaves before, and none had ever looked at them the way he had looked at her, not as property, but as a person. She lay back down, still wrapped in the blanket. Her body was tense, but slowly, exhaustion pulled her toward sleep. In the cockpit, Rian leaned back in his chair, staring at the stars ahead. He wondered who she really was, what her life had been before all this, and what it would take for her to trust him. He didn't have the answers yet, but he knew one thing. This was the first night she would sleep without a chain around her neck, and he would make sure it wasn't the last. The ship drifted on through the dark, carrying them both into a future neither of them could yet see. Days. Passed aboard the small ship, the girl spoke a little more each day. Her voice still soft but carrying a growing steadiness. Rian noticed the way her shoulders relaxed when they sat together in the cabin, or when she heard his footsteps approaching. Instead of anyone else's, she began asking small questions about the ship, about space, about Earth. Rian answered patiently. He told her about oceans that stretched farther than sight, about forests so dense the light could barely reach the ground. Her eyes lit up at these stories, as if trying to imagine such places after years of only seeing metal walls and dirty. Marquette's one morning, he found her in the cockpit, standing by the controls. Her fingers hovered above the buttons but didn't touch them. "You want to try?" he asked. She turned quickly. Almost guilty. "I was just looking," Rian smiled. "Come here." He guided her hands to the controls, showing her how to tilt the ship slightly. The vessel responded with a slow, gentle turn. Her lips parted in surprise, and for the first time, a small laugh escaped her. "That's you," Rian said. "You're flying." The laugh faded into a smile, and she tried again. The ship wobbled, then steadied. She looked at him, eyes wide with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Later that day, they landed on a trade moon to restock supplies. The station was busy. Merchants shouting prices, children darting between stalls, smells of food and oil mixing in the air. Rian walked with her through the market, letting her look at everything. At one stall, he paused by a rack of clothing. He picked up a long, soft cloak in deep blue. "This would suit you," he said. She shook her head. "I don't need it." "You've been wearing the same dress since the auction," Rian replied. "You should choose something for yourself." She hesitated, then reached for the cloak. Running her fingers over the fabric, slowly, she nodded, and he paid for it. They moved on. But as they passed a narrow alley, a rough voice called out, Well, look who it is." 3 alien men stepped into view, their eyes locked on the girl. "Thought we'd lost you," one sneered. Rian stepped between them and her without hesitation. "Keep walking," he said firmly. The largest of the 3 smirked. "You think you can keep what you bought?" "She belongs to the market. She belongs to herself," Rian said, his voice cold. The alien lunged forward, but Rian moved faster. His fist connected with the attacker's jaw. The second man swung a metal rod. Rian ducked and drove his shoulder into the alien's chest, sending him stumbling back. The third hesitated, glancing at the growing crowd, then he spat on the ground. "This isn't over, human." They retreated into the shadows, leaving Rian breathing hard but standing tall. The girl stepped forward, her eyes wide. You fought for me, I told you," he said. "No one takes you away." Her hands trembled, but she reached out, touching his arm. "No one ever fought for me before." Back at the ship, she sat quietly in the cabin, the new cloak wrapped around her. Her eyes followed him as he moved about, checking supplies, repairing a loose panel. That night, as the stars filled the windows again, she finally spoke. "Rian, why do you keep risking yourself for me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because you're worth it." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze dropped to her hands, and when she looked up again, there was a shine in her eyes. Not from fear, but from something softer, something new. In that silence, something shifted between them, not spoken, not fully understood, but real. It was the first thread of a bond that neither of them would want to break. Outside, the stars kept moving. But for the first time in years, the girl felt like she wasn't being carried by someone else's will. She felt like she was walking towards something she chose. And Rian knew, without saying it aloud, that he wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was standing beside her. The ship drifted quietly through the dark of space. the trade moon shrinking to a small dot behind them. The girl sat in the cabin, her new cloak draped over her shoulders. She was silent, but her eyes kept finding Rian as he worked in the cockpit. He had a small cut above his eyebrow from the fight earlier. The bruise was starting to form. She wanted to ask if it hurt, but the words stayed caught in her throat. After a while, he stood and headed to the supply locker, pulling out a small medkit. He cleaned the cut with practiced hands. His movements were steady, as if injuries were just a normal part of his life as he worked. She overheard voices outside, the ship traders talking near the docking bay before it had closed behind them. One voice was rough and loud. "Did you hear? That human spent his last coin at the market. Fool could have bought himself weeks of supplies, but instead he wasted it on some broken slave." Her stomach tightened. She rose from her seat and stepped quietly toward the cockpit. Rian didn't notice her at first. He was busy adjusting the ship's navigation, plotting a course to a small, green planet where they could rest for a while. "Is it true?" she asked suddenly. He turned. "What? That coin?" "The one you gave for me," she said. "Was it your last?" Rian hesitated. His jaw shifted slightly before he answered, "Yes." Her hands gripped the edge of the table. "Why?" "You could have bought food, fuel. You could have kept yourself alive." "I could have," he said, "but I couldn't walk away and leave you there." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of a hidden reason people don't do that, she whispered. "Not unless they want something." He leaned against the console, his arms folded. "I didn't want anything." Her voice wavered. "Then why? Why me?" Rian's gaze was steady. "Because I saw your eyes. You weren't just another face in the market. You were. You and I knew if I walked away, I'd never forgive myself." The room felt smaller somehow. Her chest felt tight. She turned away, unable to hold his gaze any longer. Later, she sat in her small room, the stars drifting past the window. She thought about all the people who had owned her before, how they had looked at her like a thing, a tool, a body. None of them had given anything without expecting something in return, but Rian. He had given everything and expected nothing. She remembered the sound of that last coin hitting the table, the way the auctioneer had grinned, the way Rian had taken her hand so gently. That night, she couldn't sleep. She rose and walked quietly to the cockpit. Rian was there, leaning back in the pilot's chair with his eyes half closed. "Rian," she said softly. He opened his eyes. "You should be resting." "I can't," she said, stepping closer. "Not until I say this." He tilted his head. "Waiting, you gave me my life," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "And I don't know how to repay that. But in my world, when someone saves you like that, you give them your life in return." He frowned slightly. "You don't have to repay me." "I want to," she said. Her eyes locked on his. "I choose to." For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the engines filled the silence between them. Finally, Rian sighed, looking away. "We'll talk about it when you've had more time to think." But she knew her mind was already made up. He had given her freedom, and she would use that freedom to stand beside him for as long as he would let her. As she turned to leave, she glanced back at him. His eyes were on the stars ahead, but she thought she saw the corner of his mouth lift into the faintest smile. Somewhere in the dark of space, far behind them, a different ship tracked their trail. Its captain, the same shadowy figure from the market, sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the scanner. The hunt was not over, and neither Rian nor the girl knew that the choice he made with his last coin would soon cost him more than credits. It would cost him safety, peace, and maybe even his life. Asterisk, the green planet came into view slowly, its surface covered in rolling forests and silver rivers. Clouds drifted lazily in its atmosphere, and sunlight shimmered off the water like glass. Rian brought the ship down toward a small settlement near the edge of a wide lake. The docking port was quiet. Only a few other ships anchored nearby. This was the kind of place where no one asked questions, and that was exactly what they needed. The girl stepped out of the ship, her new cloak brushing the ground. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, the air didn't smell like rust or sweat. It smelled clean, alive. She closed her eyes for a moment, just feeling it. They stayed in a modest inn built from dark wood. The rooms were simple, but warm. A welcome change from cold metal walls, Rian took care of the docking fees and arranged for supplies while she explored the edges of the lake, watching fish leap in the sun. Days passed quietly. The villagers kept to themselves, though a few gave curious glances when they saw her with Rian. She started to help in small ways, cooking meals, cleaning the ship's cabin, asking him about navigation and basic ship repairs. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, she appeared in the doorway of the small common room where Rian was fixing a damaged power cell. She was dressed in a long, soft dress she had found in the market earlier that day, her hair brushed and falling loosely over her shoulders. He looked up, a faint smile touching his face. "You look different," he said. She stepped closer, her hands clasped in front of her, her heart pounded. But her voice was steady. "In my culture," she began, "there is a way to repay a light debt. It is the most serious promise we can make." Rian set down his tools. "What kind of promise?" "It's called a binding," she said. "When someone saves your life in a way you can never repay, you give them your own, you join your life to theirs, for as long as you both live." Rian's brow furrowed. "You mean marriage?" She nodded. "It is more than marriage for us. It is a vow that cannot be broken. Not by law, not by time, not even by death in our stories." Rian leaned back in his chair, letting her words settle. "You don't owe me that," he said quietly. "I didn't save you, so you'd have to give me something in return." "I know," she replied, stepping closer until she stood right in front of him. "That is why I want to. I choose this, not because you demand it, but because I want to stand beside you. The way you stood for me." He looked into her eyes, seeing no fear, only determination. "You've been free for such a short time," he said. "What if you change your mind later?" "I won't," she said. "Freedom means I can decide for myself who I belong with. And I belong with you." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind moving through the trees outside. Rian's hands tightened slightly around the armrests of his chair. His life had been a string of lonely travels, small jobs, and dangerous runs. Never had anyone looked at him with such certainty. Finally, he nodded, a quiet smile forming. "If you're sure, then yes." Her lips curved into a soft smile, relief and joy flooding her face. She reached into the folds of her cloak and brought out a small silver chain. On it hung a single crystal that glowed faintly from within. She placed it around his neck. "Now you carry my life," she said. He touched the crystal gently, feeling its warmth. "And you carry mine," he said, though his voice was almost a whisper. That night they stood together by the lake, the stars reflecting on the still water. She rested her head against his shoulder, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked completely at peace. Neither of them saw the shadowed figure watching from the tree line, the same man from the market, his eyes glinting in the darkness. He turned away and spoke into a small device. "I found them." Far above, a ship began to descend through the clouds, drawn toward the quiet village by the trail Rian and the girl had unknowingly left behind. Their moment of peace was about to end, but for now, they stood together, bound not by chains, but by choice. The night was calm, the lake reflecting the stars like polished glass. In the small inn, the girl slept peacefully for the first time in years, her breathing steady, the silver chain of her vow resting against her neck. Rian sat near the window, keeping watch. He had learned long ago that peace could be a fragile thing, and his instincts told him it would not last. His eyes scanned the dark shapes of the trees beyond the village. Then he saw it, a faint shimmer of metal between the trunks. The moonlight caught the shape of a weapon, and his jaw tightened. He moved quietly to the girl's room, touching her shoulder gently. She woke with a start, her eyes still hazy from sleep. "Rian?" "We need to leave," he whispered. Now. She didn't ask why. She trusted him. In minutes, they had gathered what little they had, slipping out the back of the inn and moving toward the dock where the ship waited. But they weren't fast enough. From the shadows stepped the man from the market, flanked by 4 armed mercenaries. His voice was smooth, almost mocking. "You think you can steal from me, human? That girl was worth more than you can imagine. She's not yours," Rian said, his voice steady. "Not anymore." The man smirked. "Then pay for her with your life." The mercenaries moved forward. Weapons raised, Rian pushed the girl behind him and drew his own blaster, the air filled with the crack of gunfire. Flashes of light cutting through the darkness. Rian fought hard, moving with the precision of someone who had been in too many fights before. He dropped one mercenary with a clean shot to the chest, then rolled behind a crate as another blast grazed his arm. The girl's heart pounded. She wanted to help, but she had no weapon. Then she remembered the ship. If she could power it up, they could escape. She darted toward the ramp. Keeping low, Rian saw her move and covered her path, firing at the mercenaries to draw their attention. Another fell, but one managed to get close. Swinging a heavy metal staff toward Rian's head, Rian caught the blow on his forearm, pain flaring, and shoved the attacker back. Inside the ship, the girl's fingers flew over the controls as Rian had shown her. The engines roared to life, heat shimmering in the cool night air. "Rian?" she called. He broke away from the last 2 mercenaries, sprinting toward the ramp. Blaster fire followed him, one shot grazing his side. He stumbled, but didn't stop. Throwing himself onto the ramp just as it began to rise, the man from the market shouted after them, his voice full of rage, "This isn't over." Rian hit the cockpit, blood on his sleeve. "Get us in the air," he said. She pushed the throttle forward, and the ship lifted, leaving the village, the lake, and the burning anger of their pursuers behind. The stars opened up before them once again, endless and silent, when they were safely in orbit. She turned to him, her eyes wide with worry. "You're hurt. I've been worse," he said with a faint smile, though his face was pale. She helped him into the cabin and began cleaning the wound. Her hands were gentle but firm. "You could have died," she whispered. "So could you," he replied, "but we're both still here." She met his gaze, and in that moment, she knew there was no turning back from the path they had chosen. Whatever dangers came, they would face them together, hours later. As the ship drifted on autopilot, they stood in the cockpit, watching the light of a nearby star spill across the darkness. "This is our life now," Rian said quietly, "always moving, always looking over our shoulder." She slipped her hand into his. "Then we moved together." He looked at her, the faint glow from the controls lighting her face. And he realized that for the first time in years, it wasn't just surviving. He was living. They had no map for where they were going, no guarantee of safety, but they had each other, and for both of them, that was enough. As the ship vanished into the deep black, leaving the green planet far behind, the girl rested her head against his shoulder. Her chains were gone, her life was her own, and her vow was no longer just tradition. It was a promise she would keep until her last breath. The galaxy was wide and dangerous, but together, they were ready to face it.